Hi everyone, it's Ryan here from smartsportstrader.com, and in today's video I thought I'd just give you a quick update on how my investment in Betmarkets is doing. So a few months ago I made a video on Betmarkets. Betmarkets is a platform that allows you to follow tipsters and then it automatically places the bets for you. So it's quite a good concept and it's a very interesting concept. But if you've not watched that first video, then I suggest that you go back and watch that one before you watch this one, as things will make a bit more sense. So in this video I'll just quickly go through my results. I'll talk about the changes that I've made to my own portfolio, and I'll also just kind of give my general thoughts on using Betmarkets. Alright, so before getting to my current results, I thought it might be interesting to look at my results from the first video. So that was after 2 months. You can see here that I had 2,779 bets. I hadn't made a profit, I'd made a loss of €78. It was nearly a minus 8% return on my overall investment. The closing edge was nearly 3%. You can see that the yield, so that's the percentage per bet, was losing at minus 0.62, and the max drawdown I'd had on my total investment, which was £1,000, so that was like a little over €1,000, was minus 25%. So things hadn't been going too great after the first 2 months, but I just thought it might be interesting to have a look at the results from then and now, as then you can kind of compare the edges, like the closing edge, and see if that's increased or decreased, and kind of look at this yield. Just look at overall results. So that was the results after my first 2 months with Betmarkets. So I just thought I'd go over the 2 changes that I've made to my portfolio since the first video. So the first change that I made was that I removed this tipster, which is Vitalius, who's a basketball tipster. Now he turns over a lot of bets. You can see here he's had nearly 9,000 bets. So I started following him in November of last year, and he had a bit of a tough one there, minus 15%. Then he made nearly 10% in December. And then if we look at this year, I dropped him at the end of January where he had minus 20%. So it wasn't just short-term results were not like the main reason that I dropped him. It's just that his closing edge was very small here, and this doesn't take into account the margin that bookmakers applied. So on basketball markets, you know, his closing edge with the margin applied would probably be negative. And his yield at 2% is pretty decent, you know, over the amount of bets. But I just found that he was having like a big effect on the portfolio. And with the portfolio, I stake like £150 on the majority of tipsters, and then some of the other tipsters that I have, I stake between 200 and 300. So even though I only had 150 on Vitalius, I just found that, you know, his results would have a massive effect on how the overall portfolio was doing. So I removed this tipster, and the second tipster that was removed, that wasn't my choice, but this was a guy called Danny D, who was an esports tipster, and he had a really stellar record, but he also went on like a big losing run, and I noticed that he went quickly from like being minus £30 to about minus £80 in a very quick period, so like over a week or two. And then after that I received this email. So this was from the Betmarkets platform, and basically it was about Danny D's behaviour. So they'd noticed that Danny D's were showing signs of tilting, which is in poker means like chasing your losses. So after a poor performance, he was increasing the amount of bets that he was making, and he was also increasing the stake. So he could, like with Betmarkets, they can't go crazy. There's a cap on what they can stake, so it's probably like 2% or 3% possibly of the amount that you put on them, but still it can be quite obvious. So as the guys behind Betmarkets said, this was not the first time that it had happened with Danny. So they decided to exclude him in order him to undergo another verification period. But what happened is that he basically left the platform. So that was 2 tipsters that were removed from my portfolio, and those tipsters together accounted for losses of about £160. Okay, so I just thought I'd show you my portfolio, my current portfolio. So you can see at the top there's one standout performer, and that's Sander S. So he's made a profit of €180 after over 1,000 bets. He's got close to a 4% edge. So you can see he's more than doubled that initial £150 that I allocated to him. So you can see with these there's a few different amounts allocated to different tipsters. So like I said earlier, 150 was just the base amount, and then I would stake a little bit more for tipsters that I had a little bit more faith in. So like Elberton, who I added in the last video, he's got 200. He's doing really well. Like, he's got a massive closing edge. He tends to bet in the Hungarian leagues, one of his kind of focuses. And then you've got like Kanish Corey, so he's I've put £300 on him. He was a guy that I thought look like potentially one of the better tipsters. So he's only made a small profit so far, but there's a small amount of bets. So in total, I have 26 tipsters that I'm following. 11 of them are positive, 15 of them are negative. So you can see, obviously, there's some big results there, but then a lot of them are kind of just middling, where they're not making a huge amount, but they're not losing a huge amount here. So here's Philippe H. He's another guy that I allocate a little bit more money to, and he's kind of just, like I say, in that middling range, the same as Neil McDonald. We'll go down and show you some of the guys that are not performing too well. Gregors, he's another one that's I allocate 300. So he's only had 61 bets, so I don't really read too much into that. Arvis was doing really well at one point, was up over £100, but he's been on a bit of a downswing. So you can see, here's some guys that have allocated 152. And then Johns B, who I think is a pretty good tipster actually. He's got the biggest loss at nearly £50, but he's got close to a 3% edge, and he tends to tip in League One. So I'm not too concerned. So I don't really think I need to change anything here. I think that my portfolio now, I like the way it looks, and I think I've got a good balance between high volume tipsters and low volume tipsters. But obviously, when I say that, you've got like low volume tipsters like Elberton with massive edges, and you've got high volume tipsters like S. Sander that have kind of smaller edges, but they're doing very well. And Arvis as well. He's a guy that's puts through a lot of bets, but he's got a pretty decent closing edge as well, nearly 6%. So hopefully, hopefully this portfolio will make me some money. Alright, so let's take a look at my results, my current results with Betmarkets. So I've been with the platform nearly 4 months now, you can see here, and there's been 6,165 bets. I've made a loss of close to €115, so that's minus 10% on my initial investment. See that the closing edge is 2.73. So if you remember, I put up the results after my initial 2 months. So this has gone down a little bit as this was closer to 3%. But you can see it doesn't track every bet. So that's tracking 4,370 bets. And there's been a total of 6,165 bets. Now the reason behind that is some bets are live bets, so they can't track that. And also, I think with esports as well, it doesn't track it. And then you've got the yield per bet. So that's minus 0.42%. So overall, I've not made any money with Betmarkets so far, but the whole kind of premise with Betmarkets and the whole concept is to look at it as something similar to like an index fund, so it's not something that you should look at short term. Maybe my initial plan was just to leave money in for a year and then just take a look at it and reassess things, so I still kind of feel that way. I'm not overly concerned about being at a loss at this period. Like I mentioned earlier as well, I have removed 2 tipsters from this portfolio that accounted for losses of about €160. So without those 2 tipsters, this portfolio would be in profit. But obviously, you can't just go around removing all losing tipsters. I don't think that's going to work long. That's not going to work long term. But I do feel that this portfolio that I've got now is a little bit better balanced, and hopefully going forward, it'll make some money. So it'll be interesting. I'll probably do another update to this video in say 3 months' time, like with my results, and hopefully, we'll get into profit. But my overall kind of thoughts about Betmarkets are, I do think there's some improvements they could make, but I still think it's a good concept and a good platform. But one of the changes I'd like to see, and it's actually something they're implementing, they send out a monthly newsletter, and they mentioned that they're going to change the way they calculate edge. So I mentioned that they calculate edge at the moment without including the bookmaker margin, but what they're going to start to do is they're going to include the bookmaker margin. So that's like gives you a better way of like assessing the tipsters that you follow. But another thing I'd like to see is I'd like to see them make, especially with the results, I'd like to see them make a distinction between the results prior to Betmarkets and the results on Betmarkets. So like Nishikori might be is probably the best guy to highlight this. So if you look at I'll just bring up his overall results here, his all-time results. Okay, so they've got his results since 2016, but this is not on the Betmarkets platform. He sends out tips on a platform called Pikio, and these are all pre-match bets. But what you'll see with Nishikori on Betmarkets is that he's mostly placing live bets. So you can see here, there's one pre-match bet there, but the majority are live bets. So what I'd like to see in the future with Betmarkets is a distinction between this, because his results pre-match betting and his results betting live on Betmarkets, it's probably going to be different. You can't really you don't want to make an assumption using past data which isn't completely relevant to the way that he's betting going forward. So I'd like to see, for example, whenever he joined Betmarkets, if you could see some kind of distinction between that and a distinction between before Betmarkets, because I think with all tipsters, they're going to have to be betting slightly different because they're going to be managing a lot more money on Betmarkets. Some of these guys are managing like six figures, so they can't bet exactly the same as they did prior to Betmarkets. So I do think that is something that they should implement. Thanks for watching this video. Hopefully you found it enjoyable and at least a little bit interesting. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel, as that allows me to continue to create video content related to making money from the sports betting markets. If you want to learn a little bit more about Betmarkets as well, I will add a link to the official site in the description. You don't have to sign up and fund your account. You can sign up and just have a look at what tipsters they've got on offer. I think they've added 3 new tipsters in the last month. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. See ya.